During the session at the United Nations, I had a chance to speak with Ukraine's Foreign Minister, Pavlo Klimkin. I asked him what action he would like the United Nations to take.
We need a new toolbox. We need to get back to the key essence, what is entrenched in the UN statute. And it's about ensuring sovereignty, independence, and inviolability of borders. And of course, the discussions here are important. The ideas which have been launched here are important. And the very famous resolution aimed at supporting Ukraine is always critically important.
Would you like to see a UN Security Council resolution affirming Ukraine's borders and the fact that you believe it's been violated?
Absolutely. We need a very strong, bold message from the Security Council and from the General Assembly. And in that sense, we need not just a message, but also a toolbox, a very effective toolbox, how to react to the cases of infringement.
Now, you've also called for a bigger role for the OSCE, that's the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. You want an expanded role for this organization. You want more of their members to be on the ground in eastern Ukraine. Tell us more about this expanded role that you want.
Exactly. We have now a monitoring mission in place in Donetsk and Lugansk, but we are unable for weeks and months to have enough OSCE observers in place to monitor and verify the ceasefire, to monitor and verify transparently and in an unbiased way how to clearly understand what is going on the ground. We were unable for months actually to get the drones. We were unable to get the relevant video surveillance. And it's exactly the way how we should strengthen the OSCE ability to follow the whole conflict cycle. Ukraine is just a symbolic case, but we need to get better, all of us within the OSCE. And it could be also a kind of test point for the UN system, how to strengthen UN systems throughout the world.
You talk about closer monitoring of the situation on the ground in eastern Ukraine. What is the current status of the ceasefire?
Well, it's still difficult. We don't have sustainable ceasefire, but we are striving for such sustainable bilateral ceasefire. And the real precondition for that should be political will by all sides, also in Russia. And now what we need is clearly to withdraw any troops and heavy weaponry from the territory of Ukraine. We definitely need to close down the border, because it's exactly across the Ukrainian-Russian border that we've been getting inflow of mercenaries, money, heavy weaponry, just normal weapons. And of course, we need a real breakthrough on hostages, because it's not just beyond any politics, it's immoral to take hundreds and thousands of hostages, not just military men, but also teachers, businessmen. We need a real breakthrough there, and it could be a very slight, but really slight point of confidence for the future. And all that should be monitored and verified transparently by the OSCE observers.
Your president, Petro Poroshenko, has been in Washington. He addressed Congress. He's met American leaders. He's asked for lethal aid. He was denied lethal aid. They said, no, we'll give you non-lethal aid. How big a disappointment was that for Ukraine?
It's important to understand that we are talking about the whole spectrum of assistance, and we are talking about the possibilities to strengthen the capability of Ukrainian military forces. Lethal aid could be one point for this spectrum of assistance, but it's critical to get also non-lethal, high non-lethal, just to strengthen any sort of capability, but also having targeted assistance to Ukrainian reforms.
I'm wondering how that squares up with the fact that you want lethal assistance, but at the same time you say that you want to move all the heavy weapons out of the area.
Well, it's quite clear. Our military forces just have to be ready to defend Ukraine. You know, the previous regime destroyed Ukrainian military forces, their capabilities, and because of great combat spirit, because of the great achievement in organizations, we are now able to fight But our idea is not military offensive. Our idea is peaceful settlement, but we have to provide for our security, and our military forces is the background for that.
The fact that Ukraine was denied these lethal weapons by the United States, what does it tell you about Washington's commitment to your country's security?
We very much appreciative about EU's commitment to Ukraine's independence, sovereignty, and availability of borders. We've been getting quite considerable assistance in different areas, and US is just a friend, a partner for Ukraine, and a kind of precondition how the whole civilized world, and I mean the whole world with the European Union, with Canada, with Japan, could speak now with one voice for the support of Ukraine.
One of the measures that Ukraine wants to take is that you want, as you pointed out, to move heavy weapons out of the area of eastern Ukraine. You want to create a buffer zone. How far have you got with that proposal?
No, not exactly the buffer zone. I have to reiterate it. You can create the buffer zone either by an international agreement or by the resolution of the Security Council. And what we are talking about is a sort of security line. And we have to withdraw the heavy weapons up to 15 kilometers from the security line in order to make the ceasefire sustainable. But it's not about getting to a kind of buffer zone. It's not about heading towards a kind of frozen conflict. It's not about that. And we need to incorporate Donetsk and Lugansk into the all Ukrainian political process, with the local elections, with the whole decentralization process. It's not about any sort of buffer zone there.
Do you see a role for Russia in this, and what kind of a role would Russia play?
Of course, Russia has a critical role on that, and we need a clear political will from Russia to reach sustainable ceasefire, because Donetsk and Lugansk, Russian-backed terrorists, of course, are critically dependent on Russia. And it's not just about Donetsk and Lugansk. And in general, it's not just about Ukraine. It's about European security. It's about the key idea that we live in a rule-based world. And Russia broke any sort of legally binding obligation, but also the very famous Budapest Memorandum, political commitment to the sovereignty and independence of Ukraine. So we need to get Russia back on track for the sustainable solution for Donetsk and Lugansk.
What do you make of the fact that Russia says this is not our war, we're not involved here?
Yeah, but we have not just Russian involvement, but also directly Russian troops on our territory. And
Russia has denied that.
Yeah, but if you see tanks and anti-air missile rockets, any kind of military system, you can buy Kalashnikov probably on a black market, but you are hopefully unable to buy the tank or armored vehicle on a black market. And all heavy weaponry is getting to Ukraine through Ukrainian-Russian border.
Yeah, I think the point that Russia has been making is that there may be Russian troops, there may be even Russian special forces in Ukraine, but they're not fighting under the Russian flag.
Yeah, if you don't see Russian flag in Donetsk, it does not mean that the Russian forces, Russian regular troops and Russian weaponry are not involved. And it's exactly the new kind of operation, a kind of hybrid operation, we can play with terminology, which is going on. And we need to find an answer to this new challenge of a kind of completely new military activity, which is now called a kind of hybrid war. It's exactly the key point also for the United Nations to go up to.
What about sanctions against Russia? Do you believe that these sanctions have worked in any way?
Look, sanctions is just one point in a toolbox. Sanctions are important not for the sake of sanctions, and they are not aimed at ruining Russian economy. It's not our goal. The key goal is, as I've said, to get Russia back on track for sustainable ceasefire and for sustainable settlement in Donetsk and Lugansk.
Would you like to see more sanctions imposed on Russia?
I would like to see the real peaceful settlement for Donetsk and Lugansk, and it's exactly our goal. And again, it's not about sanction or other instruments from the toolbox. We need to engage anything which works for the sustainable settlement there.
When you talk about a settlement in eastern Ukraine, are you talking about a large degree of autonomy for the Russian-speaking majority in that part of Ukraine?
We are talking about decentralization. We are not talking about any sense of idea of federalization. We need united European and democratic Ukraine. And we are ready to provide to the people of Donetsk and Lugansk more freedom, but also more responsibility, more economic powers, to leave there greater share of taxes, to give them responsibility for their own fate. But it should be done through the all Ukrainian political process, not to create any kind of conclave or frozen conflicts there. And it's exactly our red line.
Right. There's just been a NATO summit which took place in Wales. It was a high-level summit, and at that summit it was resolved that NATO would set up a rapid deployment force to be deployed in Eastern Europe in a time of crisis. What do you make of that?
There were a number of important decisions in Newport. It would be up to the alliance to decide what kind of deployment they gonna carry out in the future.
I'm just wondering, from your point of view, is that not likely to raise tensions rather than defuse them?
The idea of the NATO, as I understand it, is to react, not to be proactive in such a deployment. And we have different tracks of cooperation with NATO, trust funds in different areas, also the idea how to achieve real interoperability. And we enjoy now the highest status of cooperation with NATO, and we would like to have NATO as a key anchor for security, also in Europe.
Klimkin, thank you very much for joining us.
It was a pleasure.